Okay, so welcome back everybody. So we're here for the final formal session of the day, and it's our traditional panel session where we pick a topic related to the theme, and we get on a team of experts, or at least that's the role we'll be playing for the next 45 minutes. And we get them to just hear their opinions and where we think we're going. We're also going to have the roving mic as well, so if anybody's got any burning questions, please just put your hand up, make yourself known, and we can ask you as well. There's no real script to this, so it's just sort of keeping it light, getting people's opinions. So, last few stragglers coming in, and then so without further ado, let's introduce the panel. So on your right, my forward is a man who in 41 minutes time will be our new outreach director, okay, but not before. Okay, so we've got Timothy Rabbets over here on the right hand side. We've got Nintse Dan, who's representing the diversity and inclusion representative for the ECF. Not an easy thing to say in terms of abbreviations. So Nintse's going to be giving us hopefully the opinion of the ECF and where things are going. We've taken lots of input from that over the last couple of years. We've got Laura Hoang here, who's our representative from SheCanEngineer, so an engineer herself, and a really good organisation who we started to have some quite good sort of links with. So we're delighted that she's represented here. You've also got a stand out in the exhibition area, so if people would like to go and have a chat with them about what they do, that would be great. And we've got the Chris the Catalyst, as we now refer to him. So Chris was the outreach director 2 outreach directors ago, and although at the time in INCOSE UK we weren't ignorant to D&I, we weren't doing that much. It was Chris that really sort of grabbed it by the ears and kicked us into shape and forced us to actually take this stuff seriously. So it's going to be interesting to get the different opinions that we got. I'm going to start off with Chris, if that's all right. So Chris, why did you do all this in the first place? What was the problem that you could see, and what kicked all this off, Chris?
Okay, just checking the mic works. Yeah, magic. So, running a business, but also being involved in INCOSE UK in the council. I thought I could act locally on EDI within Optima as a business, but of course it's much more powerful if I took that to the level of a professional national body for systems engineering and acted in conjunction with that. It was quite apparent to me that culturally, INCOSE UK has always, in my experience of it, been a very welcoming place. It's got a good tradition of making people welcome at its events, being naturally quite inclusive and well-meaning, well-adjusted to that. So the environment for moving in that direction was well set, but it was also quite apparent to me that being well-meaning but passive is not enough when it comes to the appropriate adoption of equality, diversity, inclusivity activities in the modern professional engineering world. And of all engineering disciplines, it makes so much sense that the systems world should embrace EDI fully, not just for the positive nature of including everybody in the right journey, but also because there's intrinsic power in that. The inclusion of a diversity of thinking in systems development work, I think, still has untapped potential to do more in the way that we tackle systems development and to take out more risk more quickly in the developments that we undertake. So I was actually quite interested in the positive power of EDI to benefit the profession, not just to benefit the professionals within the discipline. So we're at a stage where the approaches within professional bodies in this country to EDI were beginning to mature and coalesce around a way of doing such things. The Engineering Council and the scientific equivalent had been liaising on the topic. The Royal Academy of Engineering and I think it's called the Science Council both adopted a joint framework for the assessment of what professional bodies around science and technology and engineering should and could do about EDI. So I did two things. I instigated the idea that someone on the council of INCOSE UK should have formal responsibility for driving the subject in this organisation, and that we should tap into the way in which other professional bodies in this country were looking at the topic, benchmarking ourselves against approaches used in some of the larger organisations around the country in this sort of area. But of course, there's many smaller institutes involved as well. So that was the sort of journey that I started to try to make sure that there was some responsibility and accountability within INCOSE UK, and that we understood where we were at in our journey as a professional body compared with others. And then there's a third ingredient that I put into the mix, which was start activities. And the way we did that was by launching in 2 events about EDI to try to get people involved on a broader base, and have some stuff we could show to the members of INCOSE UK, so they perhaps got a few lights to follow about what sort of things could be done that would make a practical difference. And I like that idea of making a difference.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thanks for it. And I think one of the things that came out is your emphasis on actually doing things rather than let's just have a policy and talk about it. Actually, what can we do that's proactive? Okay.
Yeah.
So what I'd like to know is that was the origin. Quick couple of minutes, Timothy, on the way forwards. Where do you see things going? Any activities? And again, we appreciate we've thrown you off the deep end a bit because you're not quite in post yet. But initial ideas. Where do you think all this is going, Timothy?
So my new role will concern some of the what we need to do and the how we need to do it. And clearly it's the right and proper thing to exploit the great diversity of people we have in the country and what they can bring to systems engineering. So in terms of moving forwards, culture is very important. We are on a cultural journey. I happen to come from an employer which has a large pedigree in science, and therefore we've had a pretty diverse background of people in that organisation. And so I think I come from a very open and quite diverse background, and I think that will help me in setting forth the right sort of direction, the right sort of initiatives, engaging with the right people. It is a part of the job moving forward for sure.
Okay, thanks, Timothy. Nintse, thoughts on behalf of the Early Careers Forum? Initial thoughts. Where should we be going? Are we doing it right? Are we going in the right direction? What problems have we still got?
Yeah, I would say within the ECF, we like to have the view that as system engineers, we work on systems that are used by all demographics in society. Therefore, it's natural for us to embody the ED&I within the systems engineering discipline. And I would say in terms of where we're going, especially INCOSE UK, we have set up a DE&I group where the ECF were active members of it. And we've actually been invited to attend some supporting events such as SheCanEngineer. You had your INWED event this year where I was a speaker there. And we have interacted with different key stakeholders within the EDI space, as well as us even contributing to what we believe the stakeholders for INCOSE are in terms of ED&I. And we've actually done a visual representation on the poster, if you see in the exhibition hall. And yeah, I would say definitely it's something we look to embrace, and as ECF members, walk with that onset of ED&I as our focus.
Okay, thanks, Nintse. So that's sort of 3 opinions on almost from the inside looking out, if you want. But now we've got somebody from the outside looking in. Are you horrified? Is it okay? Are we going in the right direction? Initial thoughts, initial ideas, Laura? She's horrified, look.
No, I think what everyone's described on this panel, what my fellow panelists have said so far, sounds great. Sounds like INCOSE are in a good direction. They've got a good foundation and they're building on it. I don't really, from a sort of from an outside perspective, it's really great that you are engaging with. You've got 3 sort of DE&I organisations in the exhibition hall.
And how important is that engagement?
I think it's really. I think outwardly it shows that you care, but I think there's also the support that you provide your members as well. So it's yes, you have the partnerships and having that engagement, but it's an opportunity for your members as well to say, well, actually, there are places I can go to. And your corporate partners as well, they're like, oh, actually, maybe we need some help. We can reach out to INCOSE, or we can reach out to the organisations that they have collaborated with too.
So you see that is potentially almost like a service we could offer to our member organisations. I mean, and we've got the UK Advisory Board, 32 companies, who obviously, as the name implies, advise the strategy and direction of INCOSE UK. So that could be an opportunity to sort of take that a step forward and actually give something back rather than just looking after ourselves. Okay. Any thoughts on what Laura's just said from any of our panellists before we...
Yeah, I can jump straight in on some of that, actually. I talked about the idea of positive action, and the theme that we used for the second EDI event.
So just very quickly, Chris, what were the events?
Okay, the first one was very much a launch event, doing some showcasing of particular prominent people of diverse background, to make it very obvious that actually we had some really prominent people in the systems engineering profession who had their life journey about how they had tackled their experiences, and that sort of example of what somebody's career could look like and how they tackled the difficult bits, rose to some of those challenges, but yeah, putting some good examples and stories in front of people, I thought was probably the most powerful thing to do first, because that often then resonates with people. But the second one we did was very much on this theme of let's identify positive actions that can be taken that might make a real difference. And we themed that at 4 levels, partly with this idea of trying to provide guidance and support to different types of stakeholder. So individuals, of course, individual members is one of those stakeholder groups. The second was very much about leaders in businesses conducting systems engineering. So it's a team leadership, a group leadership, a functional leadership sort of idea. The third is around the organisations, the businesses or government enterprises that are involved in conduct of systems engineering work. And so what could they do at an organisational level as a business or a government entity? And the fourth was around professional bodies, which actually have a rather different type of existence. So that whole concept was, well, okay, we can workshop some of this stuff. We can get some ideas about what positive actions could look like. We can then get that guidance available to people at individual sort of team leader, organisational level, professional bodies. And of course, we can perhaps build on that and share on that and refine that as we go forwards. So that material exists. It's available now through the INCOSE UK website. So it's a standing resource that people can, and I hope do, draw from at times.
Okay, Timothy, over to you.
Yeah, I think INCOSE UK and INCOSE internationally have always been pretty inclusive organisations. One of the things we've done on UCAB, and I'd like to pay tribute to Lisa Pritchard and Matthew from GCHQ, is we've included EDI as a topic at all UCAB meetings, and I think that has brought it home to everybody how important a subject it is. And we also include a lot of early careers people in various activities. So early careers people are involved in council. I've yet to go to my first council meeting. So I think, there are some very positive steps that INCOSE UK has taken.
Okay. So basically, it's an open question. And so what was the problem? What would be the consequences of not doing anything?
I think you'd be restricting the demographic and characteristics of people coming into systems engineering. We desperately need scientists, engineers, etc., of all flavours in the UK, and it's the right thing to do to have a greater variety of our engineers. It brings diversity of thinking, as Chris mentioned, for example.
Okay. Laura?
So there are three things in my professional life that I am passionate about: systems engineering, human factors engineering, and ED&I. And they're all linked. And if you like, just things like Jon's talk this morning, for example, about inclusive design, it's all systems engineering. And actually, when you think about it, systems engineering, you're already doing the sort of like the inclusivity aspect of it by bringing in your stakeholders. You're thinking about the user requirements. What we build things for, we build things for humans to use. So the human factor side of it. And I think all lends itself to the ED&I aspect of it. And yes, and diversity of thought and diverse thinking is really great, but the consequence of not doing anything and actioning anything in terms of ED&I in the workplace, and my opinion is that actually there's no point in bringing in diversity if you're not going to keep it. So actually, building in the inclusivity and building inclusive and safe spaces for people to work in, you build that and they will come. You build that, the diversity will come and it will stay. And that's, I guess that's the other aspect of it. You've got the attraction and the retention of diverse engineers. And if you're not building an inclusive environment for them to be able to thrive, you're in danger of not just, your organisation not being inclusive, but actually your products are just not going to work as well.
Yeah, fair. And so, it's been brought up a couple of times. As systems engineers, we've got a naturally diverse background in terms of education and thinking, but that's not enough, obviously. So what other areas can we do better in? Because I think that's something we haven't quite got in the bag, but naturally systems engineers attracts people from all different walks of life in terms of their education, experience, and so on. So what other areas should we be looking at? So you mentioned, for example, the talk we had this morning about accessibility of people physically using products, for example. And is that something that, how do we embed that into the way that we do things?
Very simply, talking to people. Talk to the target sounds like it's not the right word, but the audience. So you've got your users, you've got stakeholders, you've got your engineers. Talk to your engineers and figure out what do they want, and how do they work, and how are they going to thrive.
Okay, so Nintse, and this sort of triggers what you were saying about stakeholders, because I guess without a good initial stakeholder sort of view, where on earth do we go from that? So what went into how did you come about generating this stakeholder map that you mentioned?
Yeah, I think for us, our starting point was really just looking at, firstly, everyone in terms of the membership, in terms of council, who we interact with, and then I think we took a wider step to look at INCOSE UK and who do INCOSE UK interact with, and basically I think we came to the conclusion that pretty much everyone who we interact with are our stakeholders when we come to ED&I, because similarly to what Laura just said, it has to be inputted at the beginning in terms of your requirements, in terms of the product you're producing, and this institution that we are building. If we want to then make people feel comfortable at the other end so that they are coming to our events and they are taking part in our products, then we need to establish that from the forefront. And so we basically told ourselves that it's pretty much everyone who's an INCOSE UK stakeholder and interacts with INCOSE UK is also a stakeholder when it comes to ED&I with INCOSE UK.
So can you see this has actually been an enabler in a way to actually obviously improve the way that we do things? But coming back to Chrissy's point about making sure this is positive, and making positive actions. And from what you've just been saying, it should be part of what we do anyway, the whole stakeholder analysis piece. And maybe this is one of the areas where we can actually make everything better. And, naturally, through one of the activities that we're already good at. So, but obviously could be better.
Yep, no, I definitely agree. I think it's an enabler. And to the point of requirements and setting it from the forefront, I think it's very important that we ourselves are more visible. So attending events put on by like SheCanEngineer, AFBE, other DE&I organizations, and even advertising system engineering jobs on their job boards, because I think we will reach wider audiences with that and definitely bringing more diverse system engineers. And I think we do a good job in terms of recruiting from different areas, but we're still a niche discipline. Not many people know about system engineering, and so I think we need to do a better job in advertising and becoming more visible in the engineering domain.
So almost like an awareness piece that we need to be doing.
A little bit, yeah.
Okay, any other thoughts on that?
In terms of putting out literature and publications, I know we've started publishing material in formats that are accessible to a greater diversity of people. So recognising EDI in its many different forms is really important, and respecting everybody for their individuality, I think, is at the crux of this.
Okay, so we've got a quick question over here from an audience member.
Not so much a question, a comment. Duncan Kemp, MOD. We've done a lot of talking about, if you like, what EDI could do for INCOSE. I'd like to kind of shift it a bit. What could systems engineering do for EDI? Despite how old I look, I wasn't there when there was systematic discrimination, but I worked with people where a graduate male engineer was paid more than a graduate female engineer. There were different pay scales for men and women. We do not exist in a world of systematic discrimination. We do exist in a world of systemic discrimination, however. And we, in our day-to-day work, deal with systemic issues. We use systems thinking to actually understand some of these issues. And I do remember a company, if you buy me a drink in the bar later, I might even tell you who it was, who decided they were going to have 50% of their graduate engineer recruits as women. They nearly doubled the number of women engineers they had, and in doing so, utterly killed their gender pay gap, because of course they just recruited just as many engineers as they had elsewhere in the business, and they were paying them graduate engineer scales rather than the very high engineering consultant scales. So I think it would be interesting to say, can we do something to use the systems thinking skills we do to actually identify where the nudge points are? It was an interesting mention earlier about INCOSE as a welcoming organisation. I know we've tried at least a dozen different attempts to make it a more welcoming thing, from assigning buddies to come to a conference to having meet and greet events. So can you give me a thought about how we might use our systems thinking skills to help identify those DEI nudge points?
Does anyone want to start off with an answer to that? Clearly not. So in which default, Tim, if any thoughts on that? Again, because it's going to be a part of your job in 17 minutes, so no pressure.
It's a good point, and I'm aware that systems thinking is one of Duncan's favourite topics. Things like stakeholder maps, understanding the demographic that we should be recruiting from, understanding the part that positive recruitment, positive encouragement versus more passive forms of encouragement have to play. Those are clearly things we need to have a view on and to actually enact moving forwards. As I haven't taken on the role just yet, going back to my employer experience, we actually recruit increasingly and the majority of our recruits, I would say, are from minority EDI backgrounds. And that is a significant change around from where we were. And we've done things like check job adverts so that they don't just appeal to a certain demographic. We also employ a lot of people from a neurodiverse background. And I think there are some issues in terms of there is a bit more management overhead initially, but the breadth of thought and the breadth of perspective are really advantageous to the work we undertake. So we've seen real benefit in shifting the demographic. Actually, in recent years, the number of women we have recruited has fallen, and it's not for want of trying. We have brought in people who, have brought up families and then returned to work, and I can see the distinct experiential benefits they actually bring to the workplace. And, many of us, even though we looked stereotypical white males, I was a single parent. I brought up 3 daughters, and I can see things that it actually brought and brings to my job moving forward that are beneficial to my employer.
Okay, any more thoughts on?
I think when it comes to things like, so in my head when I was saying about like say human factor systems engineering and ED&I, you could model EDI using your favorite framework or something like Enterprise Architect, and you've got the you've got your requirements. We talk about stakeholders and user requirements, but then like feedback is such a powerful thing as well. So you start building that into your organization, and also culture is a big thing as well, and you see that within systems engineering, especially when you're talking about things like safety culture, organizational culture. To build an inclusive culture, it has to be embedded across all of it. And I work for Amentum, and Amentum, actually, one of their core values is looking at and embracing inclusivity to foster collaboration. And so if you start building that in through there, and a controversial opinion, but I don't really believe in quotas. I think that it can be kind of, from what I was saying before, building your inclusive environment, you'll bring in the diversity. And if you do it the other way around, it doesn't always work. And so if you start looking at it from an MBSE and sort of modelling it point of view, you've got your requirements and you're always feeding back and creating that culture. That's what we can do in terms of systems thinking in ED&I.
So rather than just trying to hit targets that may or may not be artificial, and actually build it in and systems engineer the thing, because again, what you've been saying with the stakeholders and modelling it, it's all context again, isn't it? And it's understanding an appropriate number and variety of these contexts and bring them together. So we've got the skills, haven't we? So we should be, and I like that idea of we should be welcoming, encouraging people in, not going out identifying different potential targets and dragging them in. So there you go, Timothy.
Yeah, we've said that culture is very important. I'm going to throw back at Duncan. One of the really difficult things is to represent culture, to understand all the part pieces of culture. And that's a topic where, if anyone's got any bright ideas, I'd welcome input on that. Generally, when I've looked at textbooks and there's got a chapter on culture, it's the shortest chapter, and disappointingly so, when we regard it as such an important subject for systems engineering and for things like EDI.
Could we, I'm pleased you brought up the subject of publications, because I'm not allowed to stand here and not mention them. Do we need a Don't Panic on diversity and inclusion? Maybe just called Panic.
I wanted to discuss the earlier point that was made about these systems systematic issues, and I want to say it'd be useful once you have your stakeholder map to then do an influencing map and understand the interactions between the stakeholders. And I would say it's worthwhile speaking to different groups of people, because I think one of my pet peeves when it comes to ED&I, it's people discussing other people's experiences. You won't necessarily find out unless you speak to that demographic of people and really understand what their day-to-day is like, what they go through, and then from there, modify your map so that you might reduce the amount of interactions or remove specific interactions that are causing problems.
So it's getting good quality stakeholder representation then that you can actually, I was going to say interrogate, that sounds awful, doesn't it? But you can actually talk to and discuss things with. And that's got to be a good thing. So the stakeholder map that we're talking about, is that available?
Well, it's currently on the poster, so I tell people to take a picture of it. Don't know if we're selling it in terms of a map.
I'm sure everybody's looking forward to seeing it now. So. But that will be made available when it's appropriate, when it's at the right time.
Yeah.
Okay, and I think that's got to be a good step forward. Okay, Chris.
So connecting back to Duncan's idea of systems thinking applied to the topic, actually what we've been talking about there about making sure the stakeholder identification and breadth of user need identification, that's a core part of the problem space exploration that systems thinking very, very clearly recognises being necessary. So yes, that fits in straight there, and I think we've talked about that a fair bit and recognise that well. Another ingredient of systems thinking is about the architecture, and another is about the integration part of the life cycle being necessary to be able to create a solution that responds to the problem. And I think in that area about architectural features and things necessary in the integration process, there are more things to be done there. Variants of architecture responding perhaps to different groupings of user need are an architectural pattern which is commonly used in a lot of solutions. But of course, in some cases, it might be just there's a greater breadth of a core solution architecture rather than on a variant sort of pattern. But thinking about those things by default in our development work and perhaps in our organisational design would seem to me to be something that comes straight out of a systems thinking approach that is trying to address the full width of a whole problem in an inclusive manner. And recognising that in the integration stage, then I think perhaps we may find there's some other features there that we more commonly need to adopt when if we're trying to check that we are meeting that need from a diverse user and stakeholder need perspective. So the way in which we do integration and test to build to a point where what we've created genuinely serves that wider set of needs is something we should be looking to accommodate, I think. And I suspect that of the flavours of inclusivity that may be underserved at the moment, neurodiversity perhaps is lagging compared to some of the other areas that most of us would recognise.
Yeah, and that is something that on the publication side we're doing a lot of work on at the moment, and that's going to be so next year is going to see the release of our first, we just refer to it as accessible format. So we've looked at all the different neurodiversity factors and the best practice coming from the professional bodies. So font sizes, colouring, spacing, all that kind of. So that is an area we're not doing enough, I don't think, but it is an area that we are making ground into.
And we're probably quite used to thinking about that now in sort of static publications.
Yeah. But
how good are we at doing that in dynamic user interfaces?
Oh, absolutely, not nearly as well ahead. But
so there's an area of human factors meets systems meets EDI that I think has probably got a way to go
Yeah. Absolutely. I think so. I mean, some of the themes that we've seen coming out. I mean, clearly, stakeholder identification is key, and it's not just good enough just to identify them. We've got to get that stakeholder representation as well. So we've got the good. We can get good information. It's the foundation of everything that we do in systems engineering is good, consistent information. We've got this idea of, well, we should be welcoming people in. We shouldn't be going out and targeting people and dragging them in. Okay, and it's come up by at least two of you. It's this idea of, do we need some sort of diversity architecture in place, some sort of framework where we, can maybe grasp this more. So before we do our closing marks, hang on, sorry. Okay, so we've got a question.
Hi, Charlie Kenny from Optimus Systems Consultancy. Speaking of positive action, and obviously we've talked a lot about, taking a broader systems engineering approach, but we've got a lot of people in the room here today. If there is one thing that every individual in this room can take away, do differently, a positive action we can all do as individuals, what do you think that should be?
Wow. She doesn't say much, but when she does, that's a good question. So thanks, Charlie.
To be culturally open and to respect everybody as an individual.
That's two things. Okay.
I can't count.
I'd say hear everybody out on your team. So take the time to really understand how everybody works and their preferences and their best ways of working.
And not everything's visible and immediately apparent either. So, yeah. Okay, Laura?
I think you have to come back to me because everyone said that so far, so...
Okay, nicely dodged. Chris?
Okay. There's an I in EDI, inclusivity.
Yeah.
It's for everybody. And so I don't mind what the action is, but decide to do something. That's what I would ask you all to do.
Okay, so almost it doesn't matter what it is or how small it is, if everybody does a little bit.
Vastly different things.
Yeah.
If they're positive, they all matter, they all count. But deciding to do something rather than observe is what I would encourage everybody.
Yeah. Okay, fabulous.
So I think we've talked about sort of like talking to people, hearing people out. There's also a big thing to do with self-reflection as well. So it's like, what do I want as well in terms of ED&I, and being able to express that to others and being respectful when doing so. Okay,
thanks very much. So I think that's been a really interesting panel session this year. Can we thank all of our guests? Can we thank Timothy, Nintse, Laura and Chris? Can you show your appreciation, please? So thanks very much. That was really good. And yeah, let's hope we can take this forward. I like the idea of, doesn't matter how small, but positive actions, thinking about yourself as well, being inclusive, and just taking a bit more thought and not taking everything at face value. So that was fabulous. So thanks very much, guys. I really appreciate that. Can we thank our panelists one more time, please?